Hey Deep Chatters, I'm Leah Morris here with my co-host Jennifer Butler, and this is Deep Chats Podcast, where we have raw discussions about real life. Each week you can expect unfiltered, no BS conversations from the heart about topics that actually might matter to you. We're just a couple of relationship coaches who want to cut through the small talk and dive deeper. So thanks for joining us on this journey, and be sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode. Hey Deep Chatters, Leah and Jen back to have another deep chat. We've taken a little bit of a break, but we're back. Kind of going through a lot right now, to be honest. Always honest, but I think that's kind of where I want this conversation to go today, is just sort of coming from the tender place that I'm in right now, and not really wanting to shy away from that, and to sort of have this talk with you, Jen, while I'm in the midst of a breakup. It's pretty fresh. So yeah, I mean, how are you doing though, before we dive into that?
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm happy to be back here after our little break and be deep chatting again. And I'm just happy to be here to support you. And I just want to first and foremost just acknowledge your courage and vulnerability and openness and all of that, because it's not easy to share those tender places in our hearts, especially publicly. But I know that there are so many people. I mean, I think everyone has dealt with heartbreak at one point in their life, right? Maybe a few have gone through without it, but it's something everyone has dealt with or will deal with. And so I think just what you're doing is going to be so valuable to anyone who's listening.
Yeah, thanks for that encouragement. I think, yeah, it is. It is like definitely not something that you really hear talked about, I guess, in the public, in public. And these are typically conversations between girlfriends, behind closed
Yeah.
doors. And but I think I wanted to talk about it specifically because this breakup has been really different for me, in the way of it being and feeling a lot more conscious. I know you do a lot of work around conscious uncoupling.
Yeah.
That's actually something that I haven't looked a lot into, but I think being in this field of work and the sort of the amount of growth that I've gone through, and also that my ex has gone through as well, and just the people that we kind of have found ourselves in this different kind of breakup conversation with each other.
Yeah.
And it's super interesting, like nothing I've ever experienced before. I guess I'll just start with the fact that we're actually talking about what happened, and we're actually talking about we're still remaining open and vulnerable to each other after we're making this decision to break up. And I think it's really beautiful, but it definitely doesn't make it any easier.
No, definitely not. And that, what you're describing really is such a beautiful portrayal of what conscious uncoupling is, because it really does allow you to remain vulnerable and open when it's possible. It's not always possible, right? But you and your ex are actually this beautiful image of what it can look like. But no, it doesn't make it easier. Grief is grief. And in some ways, right, if you're doing this consciously, you don't get to kind of throw blame and victimize, right? So you really do have to step into this higher part of yourself and show up. Sometimes you have to be the better person, right? Or the bigger person. And all of that is so wonderful for growth, but in the
Mhm.
moment, it can absolutely feel a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely more challenging because it's, with any breakup I've really had before, it's just been so easy to be angry instead.
Yeah. Yeah.
So easy to villainize the other person and just be like, what a monster. I was right. There's no question in my mind that, they were wrong and I've been wronged. Um, it almost, it's almost like more comfortable to be in that place
Yeah.
because then I don't have to look at myself
Yep.
and I don't have to ever grow, really, is what it is. But it definitely was easier, and I think, you know, with this being so fresh, I think, and more conscious, I think I'd be lying if I didn't say like it added some more questions
Mm-hmm.
to my decision and to the decision in general. Kind of wondering like, well, could we make it work? Like, could now that the conversation is open and we're finally like laying all of these things out on the table, like, what if we did this going forward? Like, could it still work? Could we work on ourselves in this space and have something better in the future potentially?
Right.
So there are more questions, and it doesn't make it a sort of, it's not as much of a clean break as it was when I was angry with people.
Yeah. And I think that kind of puts you in the uncertainty a little bit more, right? Which requires more
Yeah.
faith, right? And
Oh yeah.
more trust in yourself, and just kind of like the willingness to let go of the wheel and let the universe take care of the how, but just really staying in your process and in your experience and relate, and it's like, it sounds like you guys are both making this conscious choice to relate to the breakup in a very unique, a very different way than what's the norm.
Yeah, totally. Totally. And yeah, I think it really does. I like that you said, that's where trust and faith comes in.
Yeah.
It's so true. And I think, part of conscious uncoupling is really asking myself, like, where did I give my power up, first of all?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and not that he asked me to give my power up. I want to like make that clear. Where did I choose to disempower myself? Where did I choose to not trust and not have faith in me and in the
Mm-hmm.
things that I knew to be true for myself? And I mean, there were definitely huge moments of self-abandonment that happened
Yeah.
in an effort to really try and hold on more tightly to this love. And what ended up happening, is that there's like resentment that starts to form. And rather than having the love be stronger, which is what I think unconsciously in the moment, like, oh, maybe if I abandon myself a little bit here, the love will be stronger. It will bring us closer together. He won't leave. I'll be more secure. But the opposite ended up happening. He got a watered down version of me.
Right.
Um, Now, granted, there there are instances where someone can make you feel more safe to really like express what it is that you need and to trust yourself more. Um, but in this case, like I want to take responsibility for that for sure. Of yeah, abandoning myself in an effort to hold more tightly to someone else and sort of saying like, I'm going to put my power there instead. Um, does that
Yeah,
make sense?
yeah. It's almost like, and I always ask this question, right? Like, because when we look at ourselves and we kind of ask that question, like, where did I give my power away? Or how did I covertly or, actively co-create this, right? Because it's a co-creation, right? And so how did I show up in a way that caused what happened, right? And we ask that question not to be putting ourselves into any sort of shame or any sort of blame, but really so that you can see exactly what you asked yourself, where you gave away your power, right? Where you abandoned yourself, where you saw things, but maybe you chose to just kind of ignore them. But then what's so powerful about once you kind of see where you did that, where you leaked your power, is you can connect to what was motivating you to do that, which you have very clearly. It sounds like your motivation for that was the attachment, was the safety of staying in that union and not losing that. And that motivation's huge, right? Because it like kind of shows you a lot about, what it is that comes up for you and like your insecurities and your triggers. Because it's different for everybody, right? Someone else might do that, but their motivation might be, something like feeling important, right? And like, you know what I mean? Or feeling chosen. So it's a very unique piece of the puzzle when you can see what your motivation is.
Yeah, it really is. And even like, I guess, attached to that, and knowing like the story I have and the motivation that I have, which is to remain in union. For me, that was also attached to, you said something like being chosen or something. For me, it was attached to like, I think, being accepted for myself fully. Like, so in a way being chosen by someone else. But I mean, like I said, I wasn't choosing myself fully.
Right.
I really wasn't. And then I was like resenting him for not choosing me fully. It's just sort of this weird web that I think I'm still slowly untangling. But yeah, I think, like they say, the world is your mirror. And all of these ways that I was like constantly disappointed in the way that the relationship was going, like I wasn't showing up for myself in that way either. And also, on top of that, through this conscious conversation that we've been able to have after our breakup, I actually realized like I wasn't showing up for him either. I was so obsessed with receiving. Where am I not receiving support? Where am I not receiving acceptance? Where am I not receiving love? That I lost sight of my partner receiving that from me. And in a lot of ways, it became like this, I needed, like, it was like this power struggle, I guess, in a lot of ways. And I'm so glad we've been able to like have these conversations after, because it really showed me where I was out of integrity too. Like I pride myself on being there for people. And he, without blaming me, really beautifully like let me know like, hey, but you weren't there for me when I needed you most. And it was like, whoa, I wasn't. And I really wasn't able to see that until I was out of the relationship and out of my ego and in a place of like active listening and compassion.
Yeah, that's a huge piece. And I think the most powerful piece of that is, how did he feel? Right? Like, how was, and if most people can't do this work together, again, this is a gift that you can, but if the person can't tell you how they felt, even imagining how that must have felt to need you and you not be there.
Yeah. And that's something like, was, I think, a big sticking point for our relationship when we were in it was like fully expressing our needs to each other. For me, it was because I thought that I was too much. And I think for him, he had the same problem.
Mm.
Maybe not wanting to be too much, not wanting to be a burden. Fear, both of us were living in that space. So I just want to like clarify, yes, it's amazing that we're both able to like speak to how that felt now, but man, I wish we could have done that, a year ago. It's just hard, I think, when you're in the pain and when you're like actually in the experience, to come from a really conscious place of like, what's going to move us forward? How can we grow here? It's so hard when you're just wrapped up in it,
Yeah.
you know? Um, but yeah, I think it's more important. No, I was gonna say like more important than him knowing how I felt, but I think it's equal importance, really, just how we both felt, in the situations. And finally, he was not coming from a place of needing me to support him anymore, and I wasn't coming from that place either. It was just like, how can we hear each other? It was like we had our own deep chat.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It was like, oh, this isn't about who's right or wrong. This isn't about judgment. This is just about simply listening and holding space for each other.
Yeah, and I think that's like such a powerful moment for anyone, because when you're going through it and you're in the pain, you're so wrapped up in your own feelings and your own
Yeah.
emotions, your own pain, your own experience. And it is hard to look at yourself. It is hard to see your blind spots. And when your eyes are open and that veil is pulled back and you see the way you showed up had affected the person that you love, right? How you
Yeah.
made them feel, how they maybe felt abandoned, how they maybe felt alone. And you realize that impact of who you were being, that moment is like, it's a hard moment, right? But it's such a moment of deep compassion and empathy. And it really, I think, allows you to find the opening for, like you said, I wish we could have done this a year ago or whenever, but you didn't, but you're here now, right? And so
Yeah.
it opens the doorway for the amends.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the amends isn't like, okay, this is so that we can get back together. The amends is so that you can restore wholeness, so that you can find your way back to some sort of center or like peace or freedom or whatever that is. But it's that act of amends, not only to restore wholeness for both of you, but to restore wholeness for yourself. Like, what's the
Yes.
amends that you're going to do for yourself so that you never, ever show up this way again and never recreate this again, whether it's with him or somebody else?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think I needed to hear that. Because I mean, a part of me is like, yeah, why is conscious uncoupling better? Why have these conversations if it still hurts so bad? And it really isn't to avoid pain. It's not to, and when I say avoid pain, I mean like get over it faster, get back together. It like there, it's not for that. I think you answered the question that I didn't ask yet. It's to restore wholeness.
Yeah.
And for me, I see that as like healing time. Like and healing looks messy and it's still painful while you're healing. Um, but it is absolutely vital to do that and to go through that restorative process, um, in order to be better for myself in the future. and to not
And
be
in the now. And in the
and
now.
in the now. Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you mentioned the resentment before. If you really sit with that resentment, I'm sure, is actually really grounded in resentment for yourself,
Mm.
right? Like, gosh, I abandoned myself. I didn't say what I felt. I watered myself down. I like totally gave this lesser version of me.
Mm.
And when you really sit with that, it's almost like, wow, to say to yourself, I'm sorry to have done that to you, right? And what can I do now to restore wholeness within myself? What amends can I make? And it might be something like, always speaking my voice, or committing to, setting the proper boundaries, whatever those specific things were, right? It's like restoring wholeness within yourself so that right now you can begin.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, yeah, I think for me, I mean, my promise to myself, I think, is to literally just like claim all of me first and foremost. I think I've done, it's all this process, this journey that we're on. And first, it's like becoming aware of like where we might be sleeping,
Yeah.
and then suddenly we're like, okay, where are the lights? How do we start turning the lights on? How do we wake up? How do we see ourselves now? And I think I've been in this phase of acceptance and like trying to accept what is and what I am, and not holding resentment for what was, and not coming from that immature place of like trying to to change everything. And I've been in this acceptance phase for so long. I think the final lock, like final click in the lock, is this experience for me of like, all these things, all these ways that you can accept yourself, but like, this is what total acceptance really is. It's really speaking from a place of like what you want and who you are, and being too much for some people. Like my story is that I'm too much emotionally, that I'm too intense. I like to dive too deep too often, and people are scared off of me, and people think that I'm like like hysterical, I don't know, not hysterical, but just too much emotionally. And so always like trying to figure out ways to be less than what I am. And through this experience, I was finally able to say in our conversation after our breakup, like, I'm intense, and I love that about myself. And I it's what makes me amazing. It's what makes me good at being me, and it's my gift, and I absolutely 100% deserve someone who's going to look at me in awe when I am fully, me, and when I'm fully in that space of um self-embrace. And and I think, like I said, like that acceptance piece has finally become like, okay, now it's integration. Now you can integrate all of the ways that you've accepted yourself in real life.
Well, and then you're going to start to see the way reality shapes itself around that, because your intensity is going to look very different when you're showing up in it from a place of ownership and love, as opposed to showing up in your intensity from a place of feeling like it's too much. So you're going to actually be in the world differently, which means your tone of voice is going to be different. I mean, I've never experienced that with you, but like there's actual specific behaviors and the way you relate to people and dynamics, that's going to look completely different because you're in a different space in your body. So you really don't know how the people around you are going to be able to receive you. Perhaps people who you've believed can't receive you are actually going to be able to, because they're going to experience you in a very, very different way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even as I was saying that and finally standing in that and saying, like, I'm intense and I fucking love that about myself, I could see how his energy shifted towards me too.
Yeah.
It was like he was proud of me for like finally claiming that. And it's funny because I know you said you've never experienced that with me before, but like I feel like I show up more naturally in who I am with friendships. And where I tend to guard myself, or not guard myself, but shrink, is in romantic relationships. So it actually took me continuing to show up in this space in front of friends, in front of complete strangers. Like when I first met you, we dove right into a deep conversation, and it took me having many encounters like that with friends and with people I was just meeting to look at myself and say, like, this is actually what connects you
Yeah.
to people. This is where you find most life. This is where you feel most drawn naturally. Like this is flow for you. And it, finally being in that with all my friendships and not having them abandon me in that space, I think has created room for me to show up finally now on this final frontier of romantic relationships fully myself. And I'm sure there'll be other ways that pop up that I'm like, wow, I also wasn't claiming that, or, I was giving away my power there. But for now, that this is my biggest lesson for sure.
Yeah. That's kind of the beauty of breakups. And, and I know you work with divorce as well.
Yeah.
And I know people always ask, like, how do you deal with it? Like, how do you work, sit with people when they're in so much pain? And it's crazy. But when you look at breakups, whether it's divorce or just a really intense heartbreak, when you look at it from this perspective, there's so much possibility and opportunity and almost excitement. Like it's really hard when you're in the grief to connect to that. But I think that's how I'm able to do it, because I know that even though we're diving in the pain, and like you said, you're not actually avoiding the pain, you're going straight into the pain. But I know that as I'm sitting there with somebody and like holding space with them, I know the truth, right? I know the secret sauce. So for me, it's like, I'm excited for them. Like, I'm excited for you. I feel my heart holds so much love and space for you because I know how painful it is, but you are like cracking wide open here, right? Like this is a whole nother layer, and you're going to graduate from so many things that have been holding you back. And it's all because of this breakup, this pain. And so I think there's so much possibility when you're willing to explore pain in this way and grief in this way.
Absolutely. And that's, yeah, people ask me that too. Like, how can you do that? Like, isn't that heavy? Doesn't that begin to affect your life? And like, even in the midst of my own breakup, which I honestly believe this is more painful than my divorce was. I think my heart's just more, there's just more that I've given heart wise. Yeah. But even in the midst of my own breakup, getting on calls with clients, it's like, there is light. I can see it. And it's amazing to have the kind of job where you can show people that light when all they see is darkness.
Yeah.
Because it does make our own darknesses less dark. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we know the secret sauce, like you said. Like, we know that this is where the magic happens. Like, God, I don't know how many times I've ever said, like, my divorce was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah.
Like, the best thing. I needed to be cracked wide open. I needed
Yep.
to be shattered,
Yep. Me
you
too.
know, in order to look at all those pieces and say, like, wait a minute, I don't need all of this stuff. What must go? What do I need more of? You know, it's an important time. It's extremely pivotal. Um, I mean, even now I'm thinking, like, what does come next?
Yeah.
You know, it's because we live together, we have a dog. Um, but it's like, you know, there's some big changes on the horizon for both of us, and although painful, it is still exciting, I think, to sort of look at the unknown with a space of or with in the space of possibility,
Yeah.
and rather than fear. I mean, yeah, there's always going to be fear, but yeah, there's still possibility.
Well, there's always going to be fear and all of that and pain and sometimes even a pull to those lesser, not lesser, but lower vibrational parts of us. But it's like, how can you feel all of that? Because it doesn't go away. It's not like we get to some place where we know I think I posted this today, right? Like, it's not like we get to some place where we don't feel fear anymore. We aren't insecure. We're not showing up in our story. Like, it's always there. It pops in, but it's like, how are you showing up outside of that story? And that's what you're doing. Like, you're choosing to not let the fear and the pain and the story lead the way, but instead you're making a choice to say, yeah, okay, I feel that, it's there, but
Yeah.
I'm going to show up over here so that I
Yeah.
can continue to grow out of that story. I
Yeah.
think that's the most powerful thing we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're so right. Like, I mean, I'm sitting here talking to you about this right now and I'm not crying, but like, I definitely have been crying a lot. Definitely been in my process. Um, definitely, like, drank too much wine last night. Like, I'm so in it. I'm so in the pain. But yeah, you know, I'm also not staying there, you know, and like you said, just sort of like showing up outside of that and looking at it from a perspective of, like, okay, what's my bigger picture here, though? You know,
Yeah.
it's sort of like this dance between, like ultra presence, like in the moment, like the nitty gritty tininess of it, and then zooming out again and saying, like, okay, what is this showing me? Where's my lesson? How can I expand? Where can I get bigger? um you know.
So then so then I would like, so then what's your intention?
What's my intention?
You can have, what's your intention for yourself, and then
mm,
what's your intention for you and your ex.
I think for me and my ex, my intention, I want to just be, I just want to, I think, experience loving him from this place. Um, and sort of, I know it's like easier to, like I said, it's so much easier to be upset. And I really don't want to, like, go there, because I think that I just don't grow there. And so I guess my only intention right now that I can think of is to just love him here, love him where we're at now, and see how that feels, and just try to sort of, like, yeah, I guess just see how that feels. Does that make sense, to the sort of not try to change how I'm feeling to escape at all, and just to, I don't know if that's making sense.
Sort of. I think the reason I asked you what your intention was is because, like you said, like there's the here, the now, the getting through the day, the stuff right on
Yeah.
the right here, but it's all inside this bigger container, right? And I think sometimes when we look, like, what does this mean, and what's the lesson, and it's like it's a lot of pressure, right? But if we can create an intention, which is this place where we're going to rise to, this place in the future, this place that's calling us forward, this place that when we say, okay, my intention, let's just say for myself in the future, or my ex and I in the future, is to be to have fully forgiven one another and to be able to look back on the relationship with a sense of love and peace and joy. Let's just say, like, whatever. That helps you when you're in the nitty gritty day-to-day stuff. That helps you to make choices, right? When I'm on the phone and somebody says something negative about my ex, well, I have a choice. If I'm going to stay aligned with my intention, I'm not going to entertain that conversation, right? I'm going to steer away. I'm going to stay in the light. So that intention kind of is like, helps to kind of lead us and guide us and pull us to be the bigger person, to rise, to expand, to find whatever it is we're supposed to find without like forcing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does make sense. And for some reason, it's like slightly painful for me to think about, which
Yeah.
is probably good
Yeah.
that I'm thinking about it, because it's like part of me like doesn't want to zoom out that much. You know, part of me
Yeah.
doesn't want to look at the future and be like, down the road, this is where I intend to be at. Um,
I mean, it could just be what you said, is just to love each other in a way that, to get to a place where we love one another in a way that sets us both free, whether that's free to be together or free to be apart. But, you know, like,
I think that is ultimately the intention, is like to end up down the road in a place where I look at everything that happened between us, and I look at, you know, who he is and who I am, with just so much love and so much like deep joyful love,
yeah,
where there's like zero animosity, there's zero, you know, ill feelings. No, I don't. I think my intention is to be in total ownership of myself, and to feel at the end of the day like there is no sense of self abandonment anymore. And then I also, if I ever do, that I'll take personal responsibility for that, rather than have it be about like someone else giving me permission to take ownership of myself. Um,
so land that plane. Yeah, land that plane. Because I know you and I are really good at kind of being up in here, but if
yeah,
you're going to bring that to earth, what
yeah.
does that look like? Or
Um,
like, what is that, like one sentence or, you know, 8 words that lands to?
Total self acceptance,
Yeah,
and like
exactly.
being in that, like you said, like the embodiment of it, rather than just having it be accepted up here, just being like totally in
Source, you're the
that.
being the source of it too. Like
Yeah.
you're sourcing your own acceptance, not looking outside of yourself for it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Thanks for helping me through this. It's been a rough week. God, I really needed to talk about this, apparently.
I mean, we've talked about this before. I think that
Yeah.
so much of like our unresolved grief and pain and things that kind of get stuck are from us just not voicing it and just keeping it in our bodies. And
Yeah.
it's like we need to be able to talk and share and connect. And
Yeah. Yeah. And there's only so much like internal um processing that I can do. Like I'm definitely, I do much better when I'm communicating about this stuff and putting words to it and bringing it back down to earth, like you said. But it is painful. And I know, you know, there's a lot of people actually going through breakups right now that I know of. And yeah, hoping that this deep chat will sort of shine some light on like the importance of actually talking about it, and not only just to talk about conscious uncoupling, but just the importance of like, you know, leaning on somebody who's able to hold space for you while you're kind of in it.
Yeah. And I think there is, I mean, gosh, thank God for our girlfriends who like rally around us and are like, you know, we love you. He's a jerk, you know, like, thank God for them. Right. It's like girlfriend code. Right. And how important it is to have people around you who are also going to hold space for you and really, really like keep an eye and like keep you focused on the fact that there is a light. Right? It's like, I can hold space for you. We had a very deep conversation, but at every moment I was holding that light for you and really firm in that you're going to get to that light. And you do have to be where you are and go through it all, but there is a light and I can hold that for you. And so just really the importance of like, just speaking in this way and giving yourself the permission to go into the pain and to really look at yourself and to grow from this so that you make it have some really beautiful and valuable meaning.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you for making me feel safe to give myself permission to talk with you about this.
Absolutely. So deep chatters, thank you for joining us. I imagine that, like Leah said, I mean, gosh, so many of us have gone through or are going through some sort of breakup. So please reach out to us. Any questions at all, you know, if you just want some guidance on how to be in a deeper conversation, a more conscious and heartfelt conversation about what you're going through, reach out with any questions and we're happy to answer or direct you to the right place. And we hope that you have a beautiful day. Take care, deep chatters. To all you deep chatters out there, Leah and I want to thank you so much for listening. This is a podcast that's all about connection, so we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us on Instagram at Deep Chats Podcast. And if you haven't already, please go to iTunes to rate and review us. Every review helps other deep chatters just like you be able to find this podcast.